In this video, we're going to talk about the column per pattern layout inside the RME table, how to configure it, and some of the things to be aware of. All right, so back in our dashboard grid, we've got a couple of things here. So inside the RME table, let me make sure that this is visible. Okay, so inside the RME table, we have these layouts here, just highlighting the section. One of them is called column per pattern. You may be familiar with horizontal and vertical. Those are cloned directly from the top items widget, so I don't really need to discuss those. Those are well documented and people are probably already familiar with them. And then we have 3 column and then column per pattern. Column per pattern is going to be the most customizable way to configure a table inside the Zabbix GUI with the RME table. It's also going to be the most complex one to set up, but it adds so much flexibility and customization to your dashboards, and you'll see in some other videos when column per pattern really comes alive. So if I select column per pattern, I've already chosen an item pattern. So in the item pattern section, there is this blue add button. Very similar, exactly like how it's set up in top items. But each time you click add, that is going to add a new column to the table. So we'll just start with this first one that I have here. Let's see. Okay, so inside the panel, we're running Zabbix 7.4, so it has that dynamic updating framework built into it now that comes out of Zabbix natively. And let's see what it doesn't like. I hit apply. At least one item grouping is required. So what that's telling us is when we click column per pattern, you probably saw this when you toggled the radio button on. So if I go from 3 column back to column per pattern, all these other fields showed up. So one of them that is required is item grouping. And item grouping, and it's described here in this question mark bubble, but basically it's going to be tags. It's always going to be tags. So as you're starting to think about using this widget and getting more use out of it, or what your items look like today, what sort of templates you're using, what sort of metrics you're collecting, you absolutely have to make sure that you are tagging your metrics in very describable, discernible, and flexible ways that you can leverage it inside this widget. So if we click the blue add for item grouping, it instantly asks you to put in an item tag value, which is really just the item tag. So best place to discover that information is none other than the latest data page. Very popular, customizable, flexible table inside the Zabbix UI. Now, interface bits received, and as well as the rest of these metrics, we're actually going to put a few of them in this column per pattern table. You'll see over here in the tag section, there's a couple of different tags that I put on each one of these metrics. Now, one of the ones that I have put on every single metric is this interface tag. You can see for all 9 metrics that pertain to switch data, we have an interface tag. I'm going to use that interface tag as my grouping. And then what's going to happen is the values are what is going to show up inside the table. So come over here, item tag value, type interface. That's our tag name. And that's pretty much it. We don't have to do anything else. And then what we get is now our table is built. So what you see over here is the leftmost column is actually going to be the value of this tag name. If we go back to the latest data page, you can see that for some of the sample data, ETH10/25, so that's the value that shows up in the table. And then the next column over is going to be host. This column will only show up if you have more than one host. If you only have a single host, it does not show up. That is by design. I'm open to changing that if folks are generally against that idea, but if you only have a single host, then there's really no need to show the host column. but I could see why that would potentially be useful. But anyway, so 2 hosts, we get a host column, and then the column per pattern that we added over here, you can see here's the value, basically. Now, the title of the column, well, for one, let's change the layout on your main configuration form under Advanced Configuration near the bottom, Show Column Header. This is also built into the Top Items widget, which it was cloned from, so the behavior is no different. But let's click on horizontal to change that. So you can see the column title is basically just the item pattern that I added. But if we go back in and click Edit, you can see that there is now a new field. So column title is only available in column per pattern, and that's because each time we click that blue add button, we get a new column. So this is bits received. So I'm going to type bits received in there. You can put whatever you want, and then we will click update, come back, wait for it to update, and now you can see it says bits received in that 3rd column, and we have all the values. Now the ordering here is a little bit different, okay? We'll talk about that here in a second, but let's add one more. So I have bits received. Now maybe I want to do bits sent. The way that this works, again, we're not going to go in here and add bits sent. That would just be another item pattern that would be put into the same column or these same cells. So everywhere where we see ETH 9/14, it would get a second item if we were to put bits sent in here, and then you'd be showing either the sum or average or the first value. That's not what we want to do. We want a second column. So we will click the blue add button that's right here. I'm trying to highlight it. And we'll do the same thing. So bits sent will be our title. Interface bits sent. We will wildcard the item pattern, and we'll do nothing else. We'll just click add and see what we get. So now we have a second column, okay? And this grouping, because I set a tag that is the same for both of these items, interface, the value is the same, I get everything in a nice clean row, okay? So this is the most traditional way to build some kind of data table. Very familiar with Excel and any other spreadsheet software. This is what a table should look like. So column per pattern is what you want to use to build something like this. Now, what do we want to... Okay, so let's go down here further. Let's talk about the ordering. So actually, let me do one other thing first. So when we only have one switch, you can see it's pretty much the same thing. We just don't have that host column. Now the ordering is, I believe, it might just be arbitrary when you don't specify any kind of ordering or you don't have multiple hosts. But let me show you how to set up the default ordering. So if you're familiar with the top hosts table, it has an ability to specify which column is your order by host. This has so many other flexibilities built into it. So for host ordering, we can limit the number of hosts that we see. By default, it says 10. So we know that we queried for 2. What if I just set 1? I think what's going to happen is, yeah, it's going to pick one of the hosts. That's not what we want to do. If you have many hosts in your environment, then I would definitely recommend increasing this. I'm just going to say 50, even though I've only queried for 2 hosts, but it's better to have a larger value. Now, host ordering, all this is doing is looking at all of your host names. I only have 2, and then limiting it to the top 50. Now, if we go with item value and we say top N 50, what's not going to work the same way is, well, how do we order this? You can see that the top value is not actually at the top. Like, I can see this value in the rightmost column is greater than this value and it is below it. And then over here in the bits received column, the second value in the column is actually greater than the first value. So the ordering doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So this section had to be changed a little bit. So if we want to order by the item value, we have to pick an item value to order by. So we have to pick one of these. I want to order by bits received. So you kind of just do the same thing that we did in the column patterns. And if we do that, what we should end up seeing is now the bits received column is ordered, top N. Sorry, up here in this section. So that's host ordering, order by item value. It's very confusing, but this whole section honestly is quite confusing. But when you start adding multiple layers and dimensions of ordering, it's not really the most intuitive thing to wrap your head around. But just know that if you want to order by one of these columns using column per pattern, choose item value, put the pattern that matches, and then you can choose your top or bottom end. So right now it's defaulted to top N. It gives you the top 50. And you can see that this table column and this table is already sorted by bits received, right? I can see that it progressively increases as we get to the top. Now, if we said bottom N, you can see that the bottom 50 interfaces are shown. So we have a whole bunch that are at 0 bits per second, and then it gets progressively larger as we go on. So you have the flexibility here to choose between top and bottom N. If you use item value up here, this section is no longer used. And I think that is about it for column per pattern. Hopefully you learned something here, and I'll see you in the next video.